So it wasn't until the next morning, Saturday, November 23rd, when Humes called the chief surgeon involved in this case in Dallas, that these pathologists who did the autopsy learned of a bullet hole in the neck. So now they already, in less than 24 hours, changed the provenance, the history of this fortuitously discovered missile, and now they said that the bullet found by Tomlinson was from the front of the president's neck. And think of the absurdity of that. This bullet, fired from the muzzle, has a velocity of almost 2,100 feet per second, going through 6-7 inches of soft tissue, the president's neck, striking no bone or cartilaginous structure of a firm nature. Might be slowed down, 150, say even down to 1,900 feet per second. Doesn't make any difference. That bullet, still traveling 1,900 feet per second, coming out, is going to be stopped suddenly and fall into the front of the president's clothing. But that was their conclusion as of Saturday. It wasn't until 5 months later, when the Zapruder film came out and all of the work had been done and the analyses and the questions that were being raised about the number of wounds, how could all these shots have been fired in that limited period of time, that they came up with the single bullet theory that holds that one bullet entered the president's back, exited from his neck, re-entered Governor Connolly's back, went through his chest, broke the rib, pierced the right lung, exited from the front of the chest, re-entered the back of the governor's wrist, broke the radius, exited from the front of the governor's right wrist, re-entered the governor's left thigh, and now, 5 months later, March, April of '64, and they are reconstructing this, the Warren Commission. Oswald is dead. They got to put it all to rest. They got this big problem, this seemingly impossible, absolutely physically incongruous relationship between what is depicted on the Zapruder film, the reactions of the two men, and what is known about the timing of the test firing of this piece of junk weapon that Oswald allegedly used, this non-automatic Mannlicher Carcano, that they came to the conclusion, March, April of '64, that the Tomlinson discovered bullet by the emergency room on beneath the stretcher, that changes from time to time, was now from Connolly's left thigh. So to recapitulate, see, on the night of the autopsy, it's from Kennedy's back. The next day, when they learn about the hole in the president's neck, it's from the front of his neck. 5-6 months later, it's from Connolly's left thigh. That's why I dubbed it a long time ago the magic bullet, because whatever is needed, it readily and happily obliges. It does gymnastics and horizontal and vertical gyrational moves that would make the creator and the builder of the most wonderful roller coaster ride in the world green with envy. The way it moves, whatever you need from it. So it indeed is a magic bullet. And by the way, that is the sine qua non of the Warren Commission report. Let me make that clear. Let me repeat that. You either have a single bullet theory, which enables there to be one shooter, and you can then argue for Oswald being that shooter, although gets shot down for many, many other reasons, but at least you can proceed from that point. But if you don't have the single bullet theory, then by definition, you've got two shooters. And before you go any further, that means formally, technically, in the eyes of the law, in the investigative world of criminalistics, forensic pathology, and criminal jurisprudence, that means two or more people. Conspiracy. Again, hearkening back to my comment before about some people, that like to be reasonable and fair and say, well, gee, maybe the single bullet theory doesn't really work. I'm sorry, sir. I'm very, very sorry, madam. You can't do that. You can't do that. If you're a Warren Commission person and you've got to swallow whole and digest with no partial regurgitation, the single bullet theory. One bullet producing 7 wounds in 2 men, moving in the fashion that I have depicted, emerging near pristine with a weight loss of 1.5%, despite having left small particles of itself in 3 different anatomical locations of Kennedy and Connally, some of which were taken to the grave with Connally in his right wrist, which his widow refused to allow people to obtain before he was buried, by the way, and so on. That's the single bullet theory. So you believe in the Warren Commission, then you believe in the single bullet theory and the tooth fairy and a lot of other things. And see me after you've viewed this program, and talk to me about buying a bridge in Brooklyn.
So after you're involved with the movie JFK,
then the JFK. Since that time, I have spoken hundreds of times. I have written a great deal. I have not written my own book. Sorry now that I haven't. I have a wonderful kind of an appendix in 6 Seconds in Dallas, Josiah Thompson's book. And I've got, I don't know, probably maybe a dozen and a half articles and chapters in various publications, including some of my own books on the Kennedy assassination. And I don't know, I don't keep track, but probably now going back 40 years since my involvement, more than 40 years, I would say that I probably have given more than 1,000 talks on the Kennedy assassination. So, it's not my lifetime career. I've had a few other things to take care of, including raising 4 wonderful kids and paying for their education and doing things professionally and so on. But I have maintained my interest in the Kennedy assassination for all of these reasons. I continue to be offended. People often ask me, how can you maintain this passion, this fervor, this great interest? And the answer is not because I think that it's going to bring about a change. And by the way, let me say something on that. When I was asked that question 40, 30, maybe even 20 years ago, I used to say, and I believed it, that in my lifetime, the truth would emerge. As I sit here today, not just because I'm older and my death is closer than it was 30, 40 years ago, but even if I had the same amount of time available to me before I die, I would still say what I'm going to state right now, and that is that it won't be in my lifetime. There's too much at stake here. It's going to take another generation or 2 before everybody is gone from the scene. Their immediate successors, whether they be family members, whether they be the people in the FBI, CIA, or whatever, that they're all gone, and everything now becomes so distant, so remote, so impersonal that people aren't concerned about the reputations. Maybe, great-granddaddy might have done this or that or so on, but it's not like my father did it or my brother did it or people in my agency did it. It's got to be far more remote in time, and that's why it's not going to happen. So I'm not doing this because I think something is going to occur, and I'm not doing it for commercial reasons. Of the 1,000 or more talks that I've given, I have gotten some occasional honorariums, but I'd say 95% of the time, no. I just do it. Groups ask me or so on. Or television programs like yours, I don't get paid for it. People think you get paid for television programs. I've never been paid for any of these television programs, and I'm delighted to do it. So it's certainly not for money, and I've never written a book. I'm not proud of that. I wish I had, but I haven't done it to write a book about Kennedy, and I'm not going to be writing a book on Kennedy. It's too late to do that in my lifetime, in my career. It offends me. This was the president, and this obstruction of justice, these multiple examples of perjury, of subornation of perjury, of interference with the criminal justice system. And, while I will repeat what I said before. Every murder, if you want to look at it from a purely religious, philosophical standpoint, is a horrible act. The fact of the matter is that your murder or mine is not the same as a murder of a president. Your family will grieve, your close friends will grieve, some colleagues at the station, and so on will grieve, and so on. But, it's not the same. This was the president. And even more specifically and more pointedly, this was a coup d'etat. This was the overthrow of the government. Something that we as Americans can accept, even without question, in Western democracies, let alone in the totalitarian nations of military dictatorships and banana republics and so on. There, we don't even think about it. We might not even pay more attention to that than we do the sports page or the comics in our morning paper. Okay? But even when it occurs in Israel or Sweden, it's more regrettable, a little bit more difficult to comprehend, but gee, it happens. But never in America. There can never be a conspiracy. No conspiracy, whether it's Lincoln, McKinley, Garfield, attempted assassinations of Roosevelt, of whomever, or say, and certainly then Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, could never have a conspiracy. That is just simply something that is unpalatable. It just is not acceptable to the American public. There can be no conspiracy. Just the way it must be, always, that James Earl Ray did it all by himself, this two-bit punk criminal, that Sirhan did it all by himself, and that, of course, Lee Harvey Oswald did it all by himself. That, you just wipe the books clean, it's over and done with, you wipe the tears from your face, and you move on. Kennedy's assassination, without getting into a political discussion, good or bad, and this is not a forum to discuss right-wing Republican and left-wing Democrats or anybody in between. That's a subject for another day, like it or not. What should we have done with Vietnam, what might have been done, and what would have happened, and so on. The fact remains that this was a dramatic change. And the fact remains that Kennedy was going to be reelected. You're looking at 5 more years of John F. Kennedy and everything that he was talking about and promoting and planning, civil rights in America, détente maybe with Cuba, détente with Russia, withdrawal from Vietnam. You're talking about mighty big things. And again, whatever anybody may think about it, mighty big things, all right? And then you were going to be followed by 8 years of Bobby Kennedy. And that, no question about that. Having won the California primary, Bobby Kennedy was going to get the Democratic nomination, and he would not have lost by that slim, hairbreadth margin that Humphrey lost, because he would not have lost the left-wing Democrat liberals who were unhappy that Humphrey had not broken with Johnson on the Vietnam War and so on. Bobby Kennedy would have had everybody in place that Humphrey had, plus he would not have lost the people that Humphrey lost. So Bobby Kennedy would have followed. God damn it!
I'm timing it for you.
No, that was just a. Okay, that's not. I don't even know if that's a big train.
Wow.
That's an important point that I always like to make. People, you got to. You got to put things in perspective. At least be honest in your analysis, and then you want to try to approach it from any one step or another. So let me just finish up.
Yeah.
So here you are, let's say, with your own beliefs and concepts and plans and hopes and objectives and dreams. So let's say that you have your own beliefs, traditions, aspirations, hopes, dreams, objectives, desires for the way in which America should function and grow and prosper. And they are antithetical to what Kennedy stands for, or at least as you perceive what he stands for. And you're looking at 5 more years of John, followed by 8 years of Bobby. 13 years is a lifetime. This isn't a ball game. You don't sit back and say, "Oh boy, wait till our team comes up, man. Sure, they got 6 runs, but wait till we, or wait till we get the ball." So they scored a touchdown. We'll show them. Okay, this is 13 years. 13 years, you can move a country in a direction that is 180 degrees away from the way you want it to move. Well, then how do you deal with that? You say, well, if you went to an average American or a fair, decent American, say, well, that's what we have elections for. It's a democracy and so on. Yeah, sure. You're going to beat John Kennedy at the polls. You're going to beat Bobby Kennedy at the polls with their money, their charisma, their friends, their bastions of strength, their support from all of the liberal and to moderate news media in the world. No way. There's only one way to see to it that America does not go down the drain in your eyes, does not go down a pathway that will inevitably lead to destruction, deterioration of the fabric of our society as you want it to be, and as you as you believe you want it to be, and you don't want it to happen, and you know in your heart and mind that it will happen, given 13 more years with John and Bobby. How do you deal with it? There's only one way. You eliminate the person. And in every country of the world, at any time that this has happened, it has been labeled for what it is. It's the overthrow of the government. It is that wonderful French definition, characterization. It is a coup d'etat. And in my opinion, that's what Kennedy's assassination was all about, followed by Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, 2 more people whom you weren't going to shut down. Because don't forget, these guys, like it or not, and again, I'm not here, whatever my views and thoughts are, that nobody cares. That's for another day. But Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, after Jack, they open up their mouths, and I don't care what it was that they said. Night is really day, day is really night, up is really down, or so on. That you got 100 million Americans immediately saying, "Yeah, man, you're right. I'm with you." And if you give them something that is reasonable and not absurd, then you got 150 million Americans that are with you. I don't deal with that. Wait until it's my turn. Think about it. That's what these cases are all about.
So what is it about the American psyche? Why are we wired to not believe that assassinations can be?
Well, it's a combination of things, and I haven't attempted to analyze it that much. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, and you need all of those. But I have been involved in politics, and I've followed it, and I'm interested, and I think I have some intelligence and some intellectual awareness. I think part of it is that the naivete of the average American vis-a-vis politics is, how shall I say it? I'm not insulting any single person, so I'm just going to say it. It is despicable, deplorable, disgusting, disgraceful, and I'm not attempting to be alliterative, but they're all good words beginning with D's. Pick a word that you want. Compared to people of similar nature, let's say in the Western world, and I've traveled a great deal and so on. You go, I don't care if it's Scandinavia, the Benelux countries, the British Commonwealth, Israel. I don't care where you go, and you talk to the average person in the street, they're going to know so much more. They're going to be so much more aware of politics. I recently had occasion, for totally unrelated reasons, to call some highly educated people, in fact, 2 of them are lawyers, in a community I shall not identify, to ask for the congressman's name. Totally unrelated. It wasn't a quiz. I wanted to find out because I wanted to maybe try to get in touch. And these 2 people, highly educated, both of whom are lawyers, did not know the name of their congressman. I swear to God. Did not know the name of their congressman. Have you not seen polls taken of Americans? Name me 1, let alone 2 or 3 appellate court judges in your state. Name me your 2 U.S. senators and your congressmen. It's unbelievable. So that's part of it. Second part is, in our naivete, there flows an innocence. With passivity, indifference, lack of knowledge, ignorance, if you want to call it that, there is an innocence, which under some circumstances, in certain situations, is pleasant. It's delightful. Nice, easygoing people, or so on, etc. And that's another part of it. Then you see, there's an innocence, and there is a susceptibility to official proclamations, which, by the way, I will repeat for emphasis, shows the dramatically the absurdity of the Warren Commission report, that despite all of that you've got 3/4 or more of the American public rejecting the Warren Commission report. But anyway, back to our little analysis of the American public. So when you tell the Americans something, that's it. And remember this, and you are in the news media business, that pre-Watergate, pre-Vietnam War, and so on, was a whole different ballgame in America. There weren't too many investigative journalists. I'm not telling you that nobody ever asked a question, whether it was a Walter Winchell or a Dorothy Kilgallen or maybe an early Walter Cronkite. But to the extent and degree and universality of this kind of quizzical, sometimes perhaps even excessively negative and doubting Thomas kind of approach by news media, nothing like this ever existed in America before. The government came out and they said something, and that was it. J. Edgar Hoover said something about this, and that was it. Today, my God, with politicians, I think maybe it's gone too far. Did you change your underwear today? Did you have sex with a cheerleader 50 years ago when you were in high school? Did you smoke marijuana in college 30 years ago? I mean, it goes on and on and on. Well, that kind of stuff did not happen. I'll give you one example to prove my point. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. If you were to go to people then, or catch the survivors today, or young people, yeah, that's right, he did have some kind of polio or something like that. All right, now, had nothing to do, and quite rightfully, as far as I'm concerned, with his ability and strength as a president. Whatever anybody may have thought about Roosevelt politically, had nothing to do. This was a cripple. This man could not move. He had 27 pounds of metal that had to be affixed and strengthened to his legs for him to stand, to appear to be standing, to give a talk. Today, I would bet you anything in the world, if you had that, you would have reporters and journalists beneath the boards of a platform taking pictures, and you would have engineers being called in to describe the bolts and nuts and screws and tensile strength of the metallic components of the braces on Roosevelt. Not his speech, not his stand vis-a-vis entering World War II or Lend-Lease's program or whatever, but let's talk about his braces, or let's talk about his sexual dalliances with the lady on his wife's staff when they went down to Warm Springs, Arkansas. Let's talk about that, okay? They never talked about that in those days. John F. Kennedy, he brought women into the White House. Judith Exner was brought into the White House. She had sex with Kennedy, and the next night had sex with a top mafioso guy in Chicago. It was never talked about. These are matters of record, by the way, now. And I don't say this as a critic of Kennedy. I admired John Kennedy, and I don't care about that personally. I don't care. But again, that's a subject for another day. Eisenhower had his mistress, that Captain Wack driver, WAC, Wack Army driver. Everybody knew about that, but nobody talked about it. Today, I mean, it's a whole different ballgame. Now, compare Americans when Mitterrand died in France, standing next to his wife at the graveside were his mistress and his illegitimate daughter, wiping their tears, their copious tears, most genuinely, along with Mitterrand's wife. Did the French care? They didn't care. So you ask about the American public. This is the American public. This is, this is our level of, and especially as it existed at that time. Today, there's more skepticism, um, there's more concern and probing, especially by news media, so on. But still, we remain politically ignorant, and all kinds of things can therefore go on. And if people then say, let me anticipate another frequently hurled out defensive explanation and kind of an apologia by the Warren Commission people. How could something like this be kept secret after all these years? Is that right? Well, may I say to you folks, are you not aware that we are still learning and being told about things that happened in World War II? That we're still learning about things. I'm talking about an official nature. I'm not talking about some individual soldier here or there. We're still learning things about the Vietnam War and the Korean War before it. Now, all those wars is fucking unbelievable. All wars are important. World War II, my God. Korean War, Vietnam War, of course they were important. I don't minimize them to a slight degree. However, in terms of the American political scene and what we would be as a country, the assassination of President Kennedy and what it led to and what evolved thereafter proved to have greater impact. Again, for better or worse, you can take it as you wish, but proved to have more impact than did the Korean War and the Vietnam War. That's for sure. They were going to play out. They had occurred. They hadn't occurred. Whatever was going to happen. Okay? So we're still learning things that have been kept secret for half a century on those matters. So don't ask me in some way to dismiss my protestations and criticisms of the Warren Commission report by saying, hey, we would have come to know the truth by now. How could anything like this be kept a secret? And you tell me how it was that you kept a secret. I don't mean I mean that various people, many people kept a secret about those wars. And one other thing, too, people say, and it's understandable, they think about how they would respond. Could they keep a secret? Can you or I keep a secret from your best friend, from your spouse, from your lover, from whomever? Probably not. I'm incapable, I don't think, of, keeping some kind. But when you are in these spook spy organizations, you have a different mentality. You do have a different mentality. You can't step into their shoes. I don't purport for one moment to be able to think like they do, any more than I could go and kill somebody like our CIA used to do. Allende here and this one there, and the Dieppe brothers in Vietnam. Whatever was necessary for America, we did. And these people had total immunity. Overthrows, revolutions, assassinations, and so on, okay? This is what they do. Now, you want to argue that you need it and so on? You want to argue maybe that you need torture of detainees at Guantanamo? Fine, argue it. But don't tell me that that's something that every American would be able to do psychologically, emotionally, viscerally, physically. No, you can't. Certain people can do it. You want to argue that it must be done, that's another matter. But don't try to argue that it is not done because you could not or would not do it or would not even think about it. That is not a valid argument.
Kind of want to shift gears a little bit. And can you tell me about some of your, see you in the media a lot. CNN, saw you on Overman not too long ago. Can you tell me about some of your
other cases?
high-profile cases?
Yeah. Well, all right. Yeah, I'll just mention them because to talk about them would be here for another 6 hours. But on the other hand, if you want to give me a weekly show and we can do this and we can have one of my cases more featured. So sequentially, from a chronological standpoint, I was then consulted in the assassination of Robert Kennedy by my good friend and colleague, Dr. Thomas Noguchi, with whom I was, by the way. I was asked, I'm frequently asked, where was I the day Kennedy was shot? I was standing, you're not going to believe this, like I made it up. I was standing in an autopsy room looking at a guy that had been shot with my friend Tom Noguchi, who at that time was the chief forensic pathologist in the Los Angeles Coroner Medical Examiner's Office before he became the chief. We were standing there. Tom's secretary came in, whispered in his ear. I saw his face go ashen, and then he told me at that time Kennedy had been shot, critically wounded. He had not yet been pronounced dead, or he had been pronounced dead, but the world hadn't been told that he was dead. That's where I was. So anyway, I was consulted by Dr. Noguchi in that case. Then I was consulted by the district attorney in the Mary Jo Kopechne case involving Ted Kennedy. I was consulted by, again, the Los Angeles coroner's office in the Symbionese Liberation Army cases involving the kidnapping of Patty Hearst. Then Captain Jeffrey McDonald, the Green Beret physician charged with the murder of his wife and 2 little girls at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, a very important case. Sonny von Bülow, who is still alive, by the way, in a deep coma in that case. Jean Harris, the headmistress of Madeira School, who was charged with the murder of Dr. Herman Tarnauer, the prominent cardiologist who wrote the Scarsdale Diet book, and I testified in that case. The death of Elvis Presley, then the death of Tammy Wynette, the death of the Secretary of Commerce Ron Brown, the death of Vincent Foster, the Branch Davidian deaths. I did second autopsies on David Carell and his 2 top lieutenants, Steve and Judy Schneider. Then O.J. Simpson, John Benet Ramsey, recently Phil Spector, and I'm sure I've forgotten a bunch of cases here and there that I would refresh myself if I went to my books and so on. But those are certainly among the most prominent. And then I've been in, pardon me?
Anna Nicole Smith.
Oh, yeah, Anna Nicole Smith and Daniel Smith. Absolutely. I did second autopsy on Daniel Smith. I'll be going down to testify in that inquest in the Bahamas probably sometime soon. And then I also did a recent second autopsy on Carol Ann Gottbaum, the lady from New York City who died in the Phoenix airport after being arrested and manacled and handcuffed and placed in seclusion at the Phoenix airport. A very prominent family. So I'm involved in the Gottbaum case. I've been consulted and working on cases involving 9/11 in terms of the civil lawsuits, people exposed, dying from various diseases, etc. And then some very prominent cases abroad, the attempted assassination on the president of Taiwan and his vice president. Prior to that, 2 strange deaths of people there tied in with all the political complexities and controversies of Taiwan. Death of the commander-in-chief of the army in Pakistan, where I did an exhumation autopsy along with 2 other pathologists, one from Scotland Yard and one from the Sûreté of France. Deaths in Israel, I testified there. The deaths of Aboriginal prisoners in Australia. Deaths in Singapore, and testified there in the Philippines, involving a question of who did it and so on. Sometimes questions and matters that have really touched upon some highly sensitive political issues. For example, the Pakistani general case, that came up when Bhutto and General Zia were squaring off and so on, and that had very much to do with that election, whether or not that general was poisoned or whether he died from a natural cause. So these are some of the major cases in which I've been involved over the years.
What about all CNN, for TV. You have anything to say about that?
Well, I enjoy those. I don't get paid for any of them, as you know. I do them in Pittsburgh. Many times they'll ask me to go to New York. If I lived in New York, I guess I would be doing this on a full-time basis. I'd have to get paid, or someone would have to adopt me. But if you're there in New York City and they want you, really, I'd be hopping around from one station to another. But many times they'll call, and because you can't be with them live, then forget about it. But I've done, again, hundreds of programs. I'm sure I haven't kept track, but it's in the several hundred cumulatively over these 45 years in which I've been involved in some of these cases. And I do them from one or two studios in Pittsburgh. They're very good, very highly competent people. So I go there. Fortunately, it's 5 minutes from this office. It's 10 minutes from my home. I drive there, place to park, go in, and they hook me up. Sometimes they'll have somebody there with some makeup, which I hate, and do the program. I've learned to take a book with me, my cell phone. Sometimes it's delayed or so on, so no time is wasted, and do the program, and then come back to the office in the daytime or back to my house on evenings and weekends. So I enjoy them very much. Once in a while, they've been frustrating and rarely unpleasant. Most of the time, they're interesting, and most of the time, they're well done with professional people. The one criticism I have, generally, and it varies. I don't say this egotistically, because even if I weren't involved, I would say the same thing. Most of these shows, almost all of them, most of the time, again, there are exceptions, if they can have two or three people discuss things, then in their eyes and their producers, 6 or 8 people would be better. And I guess they know what they're doing. It's their shows, and they know the commercial ramifications and ups and downs. But you're there to talk. Now, I love to be able to talk, and again, not because it's me. To hear anybody that's intelligent discuss something. So you blurt out something, and they'll cut you off because they've got 6 people waiting in the wings, and so on. You're sitting there, and especially, you say, when I'm in Pittsburgh and I'm not live in a studio, my mic's off. I can't even interrupt if I want to be so rude and ungracious as to attempt to do so. So that is very, very frustrating. It's intellectually and emotionally frustrating. But, nobody puts a gun to my head and makes me do it. So I do it. You can say I do it for ego or whatever, I do. But I find it interesting, too, and challenging. Some cases in which I have not been involved and come to be involved in later on. And they'll send me some of their hot wire stories, because even though I get 5 newspapers every morning, 4 on Saturday, 3 on Sundays, a couple don't have Sundays, but 5 newspapers daily. There's a lot of news, as you know, that occurs the day before that doesn't make it. So they'll come up with a hot story. TV people, they're all over the place. And they're on something mighty, mighty fast. And so they'll send me some stuff, and they'll want some comments on different kinds of cases. Like the McMahon case, the missing girl in Portugal, the little 4-year-old girl. I'm not involved in that case, but I've commented on it a dozen times, expressing my views as a forensic pathologist, what might have happened, and how could things have happened, and so on. That's an example of the kind of a case that I might be called on that I'm not involved in.
Can you, the research community in general, can you comment on, are you really in touch with the research community in general?
You're talking about the JFK research community. Well, I am in touch. I'm not into the emailing back and forth to the blogs, and I do not say that in a denigrating or intellectually arrogant or conceited manner. I just don't have the time. In fact, I marvel at some colleagues that I know are busy, and I'll sometimes, send an email, and before I get a chance to go back to my desk, their answer has already come back in, and I don't understand it. If you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, what are we, sitting by some machine? How in the world do you do it? I mean, I'm busy the whole day, from morning till night. I just don't have the time. So I'm not plugged in to the degree. But I have key people who keep me posted and who are wonderful. And I'm sure I'll leave people out, but people like Dr. Gary Aguilar, Dr. Josiah Thompson, Attorney Roger Feynman, Jim DiEugenio, John Judge, um, Jim Lazar. Um, these, and then there are others. I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but these are people that have become good friends of mine. And when it comes to JFK and so on, I know that I will get stuff. Plus, I am on the email list of many people. One great, wonderful emailer, he goes by the name of a Tree Frog. I know who he is. It's not a we know who he is. He's a wonderful critic researcher, and he's putting stuff out almost daily, and so I keep up with it. Let me say this: these people are incredible. They're phenomenal. Everybody that I've named is extremely busy with their own things. Now, uh, these are not socialite people, multimillionaires, just sitting around and playing games. These are accomplished, successful, busy, professional people who have to earn a living. Some of them are academics, some of the lawyers, a couple are doctors, and so on. So it's amazing that they do it. I marvel at their willingness, their ability, and the time and effort that they give to it. And I am grateful to them for all of the help. And I'm only sorry, I deeply regret that they weren't around when I first got started in '65. Not their fault, not my fault. They just weren't around. Um, except for Mark Lane, um, of course, and Josiah Thompson. They were involved early. Sylvia Meyer, regrettably, has died. So Mark Lane and Ting Thompson, they were around. They were among early. Other people who were involved early, but I just did not know them. But later on, these friendships developed, and they've been very helpful, very gracious, and they share too. There's some people whose names I will not give that have not been gracious and who are very guarded. And there are some people too who have come up with some theories, even though they have spent a tremendous amount of time. And I would be the first one to say that they have done an incredible scholarly job of investigating, but some of the conclusions they have arrived at, I just can't accept, and I think are unfortunate, because what they do is they provide a beautiful, beautiful straw man or straw men for the Warren Commission defenders to attack. So and so and so and so. Well, I'm not responsible for some of these wild things. I'm prepared to defend what I say about the single bullet theory. I'm prepared to talk about forensic pathology and gunshot wounds and so on, and things that relate to it, etc. I'm prepared to talk about some things of a political nature, because I have been involved politically and extensively. Even ran for the U.S. Senate some 25 years ago. So I think I have a little bit of knowledge there too from my experience and involvement in government. But there's some theories, people shooting from sewers and bridges in the sky and so on, and 16 shots and 4 shooters, and this is absurd. And they hurt us. They hurt the responsible critic researchers, but they're entitled. I can't stop them. And I always respond. I give you some theories you would not even believe. I mean, and I guess I'm naive. I'll chalk it up maybe to just trying to be a decent person. Sometimes people call me and they've got the case solved. If they sound reasonable and intelligent, I'll say, okay, what do you have, and so on. There's one recently. It is so absurd. I don't even want to mention it, because I wouldn't want to hurt his feelings. This person, very serious, and let me just say that he sees things inside the car. Inside the car. That, it's just not there. He sees things taking place inside the car at the time of the shooting. He is as sincere as the Pope is about Catholicism, as as the president is about the war in Iraq. There's no doubt about his sincerity and no commercial motivation. He has convinced himself, and not an uneducated person, that there are things in that car. They're no more there than as we sit in this room, there are 20 people around us, and there's only you and I and your colleague, the cameraman. We know that. Somebody comes in and convinced that there really were 20 other people. They were hiding behind the books and inside the upholstered chair or so on. That kind of. So that's been a bad thing for us that we have no control over.
Say anything about the split between Copa and Lancer?
Well, the split between Copa and Lancer, I was not involved. Well, involved in the sense I think I was. I may have still been chairman of Copa when the Lancer came into. I'm not sure. I really don't recall. Although I think it came later on. I don't know what to tell you exactly why the Lancer group formed and what the problems they had as they perceived it with Copa, because in Copa there were people like Gary Aguilar and Feynman and Thompson and John Judge and Jim Lazar and Dan Alcorn, another wonderful guy in the critic research community. I mean, good solid people. These are people I've named that are highly accomplished, respected professionals, and so on. So I don't know what their the basis for their genesis was. You'd have to ask them. Then they develop these programs and they start inviting some people in from the periphery, and then you get people attacking some of us and so on. I think the whole thing is most unfortunate. I don't know what to tell you because I've not been involved with Lancer. I haven't played an active role in Copa now for many years. I played a very active role in its formation and was its first chairman and continued as chairman for several years. You'd have to ask John how many years. I'm sure it's a matter of record. It was several years. And then someone else had their turn. So these are my friends. These are my colleagues. These are the people with whom I have worked. And they have their annual meetings. I've not been able to attend for a while. I'm hoping that I'll be able to start attending once again, but just been too much going on in my life, but we've maintained this contact. But for more of the internecine politics and the personalities involved, you have to get that really. I'm not avoiding your question. It's a perfectly legitimate one, and I say for emphasis that it's most regrettable that it occurred. I don't know what in the world there was a need for Lancer to form. You'd have to ask them. Well, what is it that they felt they could not accomplish by joining and strengthening and expanding Copa? What is it that bothered them? Because all the people that I've named are very reasonable people. Nobody was looking for anything. I mean, John Judge has dedicated a good part of his life to this. No gain. No financial benefits of any kind. Others that I've named, they have their own pursuits. Jim Lazar and Alcorn and Feynman are attorneys. Aguilar is a very prominent ophthalmologist. Thompson had been an academician, as I said, is now a private investigator at a very high level of endeavor, so on. So these are wonderful people. What was Lancer's problem? Who came to Lancer? What does the name mean? Who said, hey, we got to get this new group or so on? I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
Media portrayal of the assassination. You see, so many books are being written. Just a couple more, and then we'll.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
Yeah. Well, like you said, thousands of books have been written. Most of them very scholarly. Critics of the Warren Commission. Very few of them, over the years, have gotten close to the media attention as positive and deeply.
Well, the answer to that is very simple. I've already given you the answer, although not to that question in that context. The answer is, who does the book reviews? The news media. If you write a book on sex or how to tango or how to play baseball, and the New York Times, Washington Post, Time, Life magazine, etc., Associated Press, and all of the big networks buy into it, you're an overnight success. Conversely, if you're Oliver Stone and you're coming out with a movie, JFK, months before the movie is shown, you're being ripped apart. You're being torn asunder. Your reputation, everything you've ever done, is being mutilated, dissected. They went after Oliver Stone. You would have thought that he was calling for the rape of everybody's mother. I mean, it was unbelievable what took place. Go back and review that. Where did that come from? From the very same people that embraced Posner and Bugliosi with open arms, with fervor and passion. When they adopt you and promote you, tied in with your own publisher, you've got it made. Conversely, you write another book attacking the Warren Commission, they're not interested in that. And you get no play. You get no play at all. The answer is very, very simple. And isn't it amazing, too? Bugliosi comes out, he attacks Posner. So where are all the people? Where are all these news media entities that made Posner their Warren Commission pundit and ultimate sage? Shouldn't they be defending Posner today? Well, but gee, if we defend Posner, what do we do with Bugliosi? So Posner is kind of like, I guess, passively forgotten and dropped, because now we've got to concentrate on Bugliosi. Oh, it's not hard to understand that. And you don't have to be paranoid either to understand it. But I will repeat for a third or fourth time, despite all of that, gives me great pride, satisfaction, delight, and immeasurable intellectual and visceral gratitude that 75% of the American public, despite all of that, rejects the Warren Commission report's conclusion vis-a-vis Lee Harvey Oswald as a sole assassin. Think about that. And then think as the people sitting there in their mighty thrones, the New York Times, and all the way through, I won't name them again, how frustrated, how angry, how embittered, how amazed they must be. And doesn't that also then in part answer your question that when somebody comes out and says or does or writes something, again, attacking the Warren Commission, why they don't get any play? The last thing in the world that those people need and want is another strong... Look at the recent work of the scientists at Texas A&M and the scientists at the Livermore Lab in California dealing with the bullet that they say, is the hero of the single bullet. Think of that work by scholars, by professors who have nothing at all to gain. They're academic tenured professors, one of whom is a former FBI agent. Couple days, and that was it. And in many of these publications and news media, wasn't even covered. What do you think would happen if some people of equal academic stature and prominence came out with findings that would solidify and corroborate and buttress the conclusions of the Warren Commission vis-a-vis Commission Exhibit 399, the hero of the single bullet theory? How would that be handled? You think that would get a little bit more coverage? It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. It's abominable. It's an insult to decent, honest journalism.
And kind of to wrap up, what if someone said, the government said, okay, you got me. This is exactly how it happened. If the full truth came out.
What if the whole truth were to come out? It's not going to happen in my lifetime, but let's just say it does. Or that's okay, down the road or so on. It's a very good question. Well, it's too late to change history for openers, right? And that is why I think that someday the truth will come out, because it will reach a point that not only will it be impossible to retroactively alter and revise history to be a revisionist of history, it will also be so remote in time and so depersonalized. Like you care a great deal about your parents. You may love your grandparents, but gee, what if you didn't even know your grandparents? As in my case. I love and honor them in my memory. I never met them. They were in the old country in Russia and Lithuania. I don't know them. My great grandparents haven't any idea at all. You see what I mean? You get the idea. So third, fourth, fifth generation removed, you're in the FBI, you're in the CIA, you're in this political party or that group or so on. So who cares now in the year 2050? Man, that's a whole other world. So what would happen? I don't know. The one good thing that would happen, that I have said repeatedly, and I hope not with too much naivete, is that it would go a long way, not of totally guaranteeing that this kind of thing would never happen again, but it will go a long way at likely preventing something like this from happening again, because people would give a lot of thought to, hey, can we get away with this kind of thing again? We had those three big hits back then in the 60s, man. Pre-DNA, pre-this, the news media involvement. And that reminds me, I want to harken back to, you asked about news media, my comments about New York Times. Think about how they feel, too. They were asleep at the switch. Ask yourself this. Ask them if you could get them on camera. How would you, Mr. New York Times, and Mr. Life and Time Magazine and AP, how would you handle this kind of a situation today? What would you want to know? What would be the questions you would ask? They didn't ask them then. Don't you think that there's a tremendous amount of embarrassment and guilt that they have suppressed? Some of it they are consciously aware of, and others have been suppressed so much that it's buried deep in their subconscious. Don't you think tremendous embarrassment? And for those who are moral and ethical and honest and decent, incredible guilt. Hey, we didn't do the kind of job we should have. We didn't ask the kinds of questions we should have. It was a whole different America. There's another reason, you see, why they are so plugged in. Absolutely. So absolutely, totally, and completely plugged in to the Warren Commission report. So what would happen? Probably not very much. Americans would be more skeptical, more doubtful of government. That's probably a consideration that some of the government people have, Dems and Republicans alike, and so on. And more awareness, more sensitivity of how government can lie to us, how they can manipulate and mold public opinion. These would be good things. And they are the pragmatic. Somebody can argue, well, the truth should always be known, and so on and so forth. And I'm in favor of that. But that's not, simply very significant from a pragmatic standpoint. But I think that there are real reasons of a more tangible and reasonably anticipated nature why the truth should emerge. Okay?
Do you have anything?
No, my God, you've covered everything. No, I thank you very much.